"You have no idea who I am," the tycoon's mother shrieked, her hand raised as if to strike. Every diner froze. Silence sweeping the room, but when the unassuming waitress finally spoke, her reply struck such fear that even the woman's own son turned pale. The Golden Crown wasn't just a restaurant. It was the city's most inaccessible sanctuary for the elite. Those walls had absorbed more multi-million-dollar handshakes, dynasty mergers, and buried scandals than a corporate law firm. Crystal chandeliers drifted overhead like man-made star clusters, bathing the room in a heavy, gilded glow that reflected off silk linens and silverware worth more than a server's rent for 6 months. Isabel Montenegro weaved through the dining floor, a heavy tray balanced effortlessly on her fingertips. She had put in enough years at the Golden Crown to memorize the floor plan and the eccentric demands of the clientele. She knew the casual cruelty of people who thought a high credit limit gave them permission to dehumanize the staff, but tonight felt ominous. The shift in atmosphere was instant the second she clocked in and saw Ramiro Fuentes, the manager, looking like he had seen a ghost. "Mercedes is inbound," Ramiro whispered, his voice shaking as if he were reporting an approaching hurricane. "She's bringing her son. Prime table. And listen, Isabel, 0 margin for error. None." A cold dread settled in Isabel's stomach at the mention of that name. Mercedes Villanueva. Just hearing those syllables was enough to send the entire kitchen staff into a panic. The widow of Aurelio Villanueva, a self-made titan of industry who left behind a legacy of hard work and an inheritance large enough to buy a small country. But where Aurelio had been a man of the people, generous to a fault, his wife was the polar opposite. She was a walking nightmare for the service industry, capable of reducing veteran managers to tears just by walking through the door. She had ruined careers and demanded firing simply because she didn't like the way a busboy looked at her. Her words cut deeper than a chef's blade, and her disdain for the working class was boundless. And tonight, Isabel was the lamb being led to slaughter. Valentina Rios, her friend and fellow server, hurried over with a look of pure concern. "I tried to swap tables with you, but Ramiro shut me down. He claims you're the Iron Lady of the floor, but we both know he just means you're too desperate for the paycheck to walk out mid-shift." Isabel offered a grim, tight-lipped smile. "You know the rumors as well as I do. Last time she dined out, she took 3 servers' heads on a platter. One was a 10-year veteran. I know the risks, Valentina, but I can't afford to be afraid. My mom needs me. Fear is a luxury I don't have." Valentina watched her, torn between respect and pity. She knew the stakes. Isabel was the sole lifeline for her mother, Esperanza, whose health was in free fall. Every single tip went straight to the pharmacy or the mounting stack of medical bills that seemed to multiply overnight. The heavy thud of the main entrance swinging open silenced them both. The air left the room, the ambient noise sucked away as if someone hit the mute button on reality. Mercedes Villanueva was here. She didn't just walk. She strode as if the floorboards should be grateful for the touch of her heels. Her spine was steel, chin tilted up at that precise angle of superiority only old money seems to master. Every movement a calculated insult to everyone else. Her body language screamed that she was royalty among peasants. Trailing in her wake was Andres, her only son. Despite inheriting the empire, the man was clearly living under the thumb of the matriarch. Word on the street was that Mommy Dearest orchestrated his entire existence. Investments, friends, and especially his love life. Behind closed doors, people referred to him as the Villanueva puppet. Ramiro practically tripped over himself rushing to greet them, wearing a smile so tight it looked physically painful. "Mrs. Villanueva, Mr. Villanueva, an absolute privilege. Your usual table is prepared." She didn't even acknowledge his existence. She breezed past him like he was a coat rack. "I trust the service has improved since my last visit. The vintage served last time was tepid. I drank it only because competence seems to be in short supply around here. I personally guarantee perfection tonight, ma'am. Our finest server has been assigned to you exclusively." Mercedes finally turned her gaze to the little man. Her stare was enough to wither a combat veteran. "For your sake, let's hope so." They claimed the VIP table, the spot with the panoramic view that allowed her to look down on the rest of the dining room like a judge on a bench. Andres took the seat opposite her, shoulders slumped, embodying a man who had spent a lifetime trying to disappear. Isabel took a steadying breath before making the long walk over to their table. She could feel the rest of the staff watching her back, bracing themselves for the inevitable train wreck. They were practically taking bets on how long it would take for Doña Mercedes to find a flaw. "Good evening," Isabel kept her tone. crisp and purse. Hey, sis and his artist. Welcome to the Golden Crown. I'm Isabel, and and I'll be taking care of you this evening. Can I start you off with some drinks? Doña Mercedes scanned her from head to toe, a specific kind of inspection reserved for those who enjoy making others feel small. It was a gaze weaponized to strip away a person's worth. Mineral water, still. I wanted it room temperature, not chilled, not lukewarm, and bring the bottle out sealed. I don't trust the sort of things that happen back in that kitchen. Certainly, ma'am. And for my son, bring a proper whiskey. None of that swill you pour for the regular clientele. Isabel didn't flinch, even though every syllable felt like a pinprick aimed straight at her self-respect. She retreated to the bar, feeling the woman's glare burning a hole between her shoulder blades. Valentina cut her off near the station. How bad? About what I expected. I've got this. Watch your step, Isabel. That woman is at war with the entire planet. Isabel nodded and went to work. She prepped the order with surgical precision, triple-checking every detail against the woman's impossible standards. The sealed mineral water, perfectly ambient, and the top-shelf whiskey kept under lock and key for high-maintenance tables. Back at the table, Doña Mercedes was holding court with her son, or rather, lecturing while he quietly nodded along. It's time you grew up, Andres. I've already spoken with the Mendoza family. Their daughter Catalina is ideal. Good lineage, educated, and crucially, she knows a wife's place. Mother, please, we've been over this. I have zero interest in Catalina. I wasn't asking for your opinion. I'm telling you what is going to happen. People like us, the Villanuevas, we don't mix with commoners. Your father made that mistake once. Look where that got him. Isabel was pouring the water when her hand gave a slight, involuntary twitch. Those words struck a chord, unlocking a memory she'd kept buried for years. Your water, ma'am, and the whiskey for you, sir. Doña Mercedes snatched the bottle, inspecting it like she was looking for fingerprints at a crime scene. This bottle is damp. Why is it damp? It's just natural condensation, ma'am, the difference between the room's humidity and the glass surface. Don't lecture me with science like I'm some uneducated fool. Bring me a dry one. Right away, ma'am. Isabel grabbed the offensive bottle and marched back. In the kitchen, Chef Maximo watched her with a pitying look. Doña Mercedes, I assume? Who else? Hang in there, kid. That woman has tried to break people made of sterner stuff than us. But we're still standing. Isabel flashed a quick, grateful smile, grabbed a fresh bottle, and buffed it bone dry before heading back out. The rest of the meal followed the same exhausting script. Doña Mercedes found a flaw in every bite, every movement, every nuance. The soup was practically lava. The salad contained a leaf she found offensive. The bread lacked the proper crunch. Isabel fielded every gripe gracefully, but her patience was burning down like a wick nearing the wax. Andres barely touched his plate. He seemed far more captivated by watching Isabel than listening to his mother's endless droning. Every time she stepped into their orbit, his eyes tracked her with a focus she couldn't quite decode. Andres, stop ogling the help. Doña Mercedes' voice sliced through the air. It's incredibly tacky. I wasn't looking at anyone. Don't lie to me, I know you, and I'm warning you, don't even think about it. These people exist to serve us, not to socialize with us. Isabel, clearing the appetizer plates, felt the physical slap of the comment. The help. These people. As if they weren't human, as if they didn't have dreams or families, but she swallowed the bile and her pride, just like she always did, for her mom, for the rent, for survival. The breaking point arrived with the dessert course. Isabel carried out the signature dish, an intricate pastry masterpiece that Chef Maximo had crafted specifically for this table, knowing exactly who the audience was. It was flawless, a little edible sculpture, but when Isabel set it down, Doña Mercedes didn't even deign to look at it. I didn't order this. It's the house special, ma'am, compliments of the chef. Do I look like I need handouts? You think I can't afford my own dessert? No, ma'am, absolutely not. It's just a restaurant tradition for our most VIP guests. Mercedes shoved the plate away with a sneer of pure disgust. The motion was so violent that the dessert slid right off the table, crashing to the floor and shattering in front of a horrified audience. Get this garbage out of my sight and bring me the dessert menu. I'll decide what I eat myself. Isabel crouched down to gather the broken shards, feeling the weight of every eye in the restaurant pressing on her. Humiliation burned in her chest, but she kept her face completely blank. Right away, ma'am. But, as she swept up the scattered porcelain and cream, something slipped from her pocket. A small object that tumbled out and rolled until it hit Mercedes's shoe. It was an old photograph, worn at the edges by time, the one thing Isabel always kept close. Mercedes snatched it up before Isabel could react, and the moment her eyes locked onto the image, the blood drained from her face. "Where did you get this?" Her voice had transformed. The authority was gone, replaced by something else, something dangerously close to fear. "That belongs to me, ma'am. Please give it back." "Where did you get this photo?" Mercedes stood up, her hand trembling as she clutched the picture. "Answer me!" Andres, confused, tried to see what was in the photo that had rattled his mother so badly. "Mother, what's wrong?" "Stay out of this, Andres." The entire dining room had fallen silent. The patrons, the staff, even the background music seemed to have cut out. Isabel straightened up slowly, her gaze locking with Mercedes's. And right then, something shifted in her expression. The professional veneer cracked. The submissiveness vanished. What was left was something no one expected to see on the face of a simple server. Determination. "That photograph," Isabel said, her voice ringing clear through the silence, "belonged to my mother. And the man standing next to a woman who looks very much like you, Mrs. Villanueva, is the same man whose portrait hangs in this lobby." Every head turned toward the entrance, where the elegant portrait of Aurelio Villanueva loomed over the hall. "So tell me, ma'am," Isabel continued, her voice gaining strength, "why does my mother have a picture of your late husband, taken long before you ever entered his life?" The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in her life, Mercedes was speechless, and Andres stared at the waitress as if seeing her for the very first time. The tension in the golden crown was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Diners had stopped eating, waiters had frozen in place, and even the air felt heavy, waiting for the fallout. Mercedes Villanueva held the photograph with hands that couldn't hide their shaking. Her eyes, usually so cold and calculating, betrayed something none of them had ever witnessed: vulnerability. "Where did you find this?" Her voice came out as a raspy whisper stripped of its usual command. "Who sent you?" Isabel didn't back down. Something had woken up inside her, something she had kept dormant her whole life out of fear, out of survival, out of her mother's constant warnings never to ask about the past. "No one sent me. That photo has been in my family since before I was born. My mother kept it in a box with other things she never let me fully see." "You're lying." Mercedes raised her voice, but desperation leaked through. "This is a trap. Someone put you here to extort us. How much do you want? How much did they pay you?" "Mother, please calm down." Andres had stood up, his face a mask of deep confusion. "What is going on? Why is a simple photo doing this to you? You don't understand anything." Mercedes turned on her son with a ferocity that made him recoil. "You never have?" Ramiro Fuentes, the manager, finally found the courage to intervene. He approached with cautious steps, like walking up to a wounded animal. "Perhaps it would be best to continue this conversation in private. We have a private room where you could—" "Don't tell me what to do." Mercedes practically spat the words. "You." She pointed an accusing finger at Isabel. "You and I are going to talk. Now, in private." "I have nothing to discuss with you in private," Isabel replied, surprised by the steel in her own voice. "Whatever you have to say, you can say right here. You dare defy me, a simple waitress? I am not a simple waitress, ma'am. I am a woman working honestly to support her family, and I deserve the same respect as anyone else in this restaurant." A murmur rippled through the room. No one, absolutely no one, spoke to Mercedes Villanueva like that. This woman had destroyed careers, ruined businesses, and turned lives into living nightmares for much less. But Isabel wasn't afraid anymore, or perhaps the fear was still there, but something stronger had finally overtaken it. It was a hunger to know, a desperate need to understand why her mother guarded that photograph like a holy relic, to unearth the secret that had shaped her entire existence without her even knowing. Doña Mercedes took a cute step toward Isabel, closing the gap between them. She was close enough for Isabel to count the cracks in her foundation, the fine lines where years of bitterness had settled despite the expensive makeup. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, little girl," hissed Doña Mercedes. "I can break you. I can ensure you never earn another dime in this city. I have the power to turn your life and your mother's into a living hell with no exit." Why didn't Isabel flinch? Over an old snapshot? What was hidden in that frame that terrified this powerful woman so much? Mercedes's hand shot up. It was a reflex, sharp and violent, moving before anyone else in the room could blink. But the strike never landed. A firm grip caught her wrist in midair. It was Andres. "That is enough, Mother." Doña Mercedes stared at her son like he was a stranger wearing Andres's face. What do you think you're doing? What I should have done ages ago. I'm stopping you, and yes, I dare because this has crossed every line. My whole life, I've watched you treat people like dirt. I've watched you weaponize our wealth to crush, humiliate, and control anyone below you. And I stayed silent because cowardice was easier than fighting you. Andres released his mother's arm and turned to face Isabel. The emptiness usually haunting his eyes was gone, replaced by something that looked like sincere shame. I'm sorry. For her behavior. For our silence. No human being deserves to be treated this way. Isabel was speechless. She never expected the Prince of Puppets, the man everyone said had no backbone, to be the one catching the tyrant's hand. Andres, you are making a grave mistake. Doña Mercedes smoothed her dress, regaining composure, but the steel was back in her voice. That girl and her mother are poison. They threaten everything your father built from the ground up. My father? Andres locked eyes on the crumpled photo in her hand. Give that to me. No, Mother, show it to me. I said no, but youth was on his side. He snatched the photograph before she could pull away. As his gaze fell on the image, the color drained from his face. This is Father. He looks so young here, younger than I ever remember seeing him. And this woman beside him. It's not you, Mother. Andres, listen to me. Who is she? He pointed a trembling finger at the figure. Who is this woman holding my father like he was the only thing that mattered in the world? Doña Mercedes closed her eyes, exhaling a breath that smelled of defeat. She was nobody, a nothing. That's my mother. The room went silent as Isabel spoke, startled by the sound of her own voice. The woman in that photograph is Esperanza Moreno, my mother. And if the look on Don Aurelio's face tells the truth, he loved her. He truly loved her. Doña Mercedes let out a jagged sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. Love. What a pathetic, useless word. Love doesn't build dynasties. Love doesn't protect fortunes. Love is a fairy tale the poor invent to feel better about having empty pockets. So, it is true then? Andres looked at the matriarch, begging for a denial that wasn't coming. Father loved someone else before you? Not just before. During. After. Always. Aurelio never stopped pining for her, even after she made the choices that tore them apart. What choices? Isabel stepped forward, starving for the truth. What happened between them? Why has my mother kept this silence for 20 years? Why hide a simple photo like it's evidence of a felony? Because that is exactly what it is. Doña Mercedes practically spat the words out. Your mother committed a crime against this family's legacy. A crime against my marriage that cost me a lifetime of happiness. My mother is the most honest woman I know. She would never— Your mother was the help, Mercedes cut in, her voice dripping with classist venom. Just a maid serving the Villanueva family. A servant who forgot her place and dared to look up at the master's son. A gold digger who sank her claws into Aurelio when he was young and foolish, filling his head with nonsense about eternal romance. Lies, it's the truth. And when the family found out what the little maid was up to, they did what any respectable dynasty would do to protect their own. They fired her. They scrubbed her from their lives and paid her a massive settlement to vanish and never speak to Aurelio again. The ground seemed to shift under Isabel's feet. Her mother, a maid for the Villanuevas, fired, paid off, erased. Why had she never breathed a word of this history? I don't believe you, Isabel said, though the steel in her voice was bending. My mother has her reasons for silence, but she is not a thief. Believe what you want, girl. The facts remain. Your mother took the cash and ran, and Aurelio, heartbroken, eventually did his duty and married me. A proper union arranged between equals, as it should have been from the start. I gave that man a son. I kept our reputation spotless. I stood right there building his legacy brick by brick, yet she was the only one living in his head. Andres's voice was barely a whisper, a private realization leaking out for the room to hear. That explains the constant gloom, the way he was never really there, even when we were celebrating the big wins. I always blamed the business, the stress of the empire, but it was a ghost. Your father worshipped the ground you walked on, though. Mercedes whipped around to face her son, panic finally setting in. Every move he made was for your benefit, for your inheritance, to secure this family's standing. Did his happiness ever factor into the equation, Mother? Even once? The silence that landed in the room was heavy enough to crush bones. You could actually watch Mercedes age in real time, the ironclad facade she had worn for 40 years finally showing hairline fractures. "I did what was necessary," she hissed, low and defensive. "I have always done exactly what survival required." Isabel watched the elite family implode, feeling the floor turning into quicksand beneath her own sneakers. Her entire identity, her mother's image, her past, it was all dissolving like sugar in hot tea. "I need to call my mother," she managed to say. "I need to hear it from her lips." "She won't say a word." Mercedes snapped back into her role as the Ice Queen. "We paid a premium for her silence, and she cashed the check. Was this a recent transaction?" Mercedes didn't blink, but the lack of denial was loud and clear. "When?" Isabel pressed, voice rising. "When exactly did you buy my mother off? That is above your pay grade." "It is entirely my business. It is my life, my narrative you are rewriting. I earned the right to know." Ramiro Fuentes, who had been standing still as a piece of furniture the whole time, finally stepped in. "Isabel, why don't you clock out for the night? I will handle the—" "No." Isabel cut him off cold. "I am not walking out that door without the truth." "Then perhaps I shall make my exit." Mercedes snatched her designer bag with stiff, angry fingers. "Andres, we are leaving." "No, Mother, I am staying right here." She glared, but he held his ground. "Excuse me? I said I am staying. This involves my father's legacy, and I deserve the facts just as much as she does." Mercedes looked at her son like he was a stranger she had just met on the street. A flicker crossed her gaze, maybe grief, probably just disappointment. "You are making a tactical error, Andres, one with a very high price tag. Maybe so, but it is mine to make. I am done living my life according to your spreadsheet." Without wasting another breath, the matriarch turned on her heel and marched toward the exit. The other diners glued their eyes to their plates as she passed, terrified of catching a stray spark from her rage. As the heavy doors swung shut, the entire room seemed to deflate, a collective exhale releasing the tension. Andres pivoted to face Isabel. "I apologize for all of that. Her behavior, the lies, the whole mess." "Why didn't you leave?" Isabel asked, genuinely confused. "You could have just followed the money and walked away from this train wreck." "Because my whole life has felt like a puzzle with the centerpiece missing. And I have a gut feeling that you, or your mother, are holding it." Valentina crept forward, gently placing a hand on Isabel's uniform sleeve. "Hey, are you holding up?" "I don't know," Isabel answered, voice hollow. "I don't know anything anymore." Chef Maximo Ibarra emerged from the kitchen swinging doors, wearing a look that was half panic, half recognition. "Isabel," the chef said, his voice tighter than a drumskin. "There is something you need to hear, a conversation I should have started years ago." "Chef, what is this?" "I knew your mother back in the day, when we were just starting out. We were staff together at the Villanueva estate, and I know exactly what went down between her and Don Aurelio. I know the secret Mercedes has been burying for decades." Isabel's heart was hammering against her ribs so hard she thought it might crack them. "What secret?" Maximo scanned the room, checking for eavesdroppers before he dropped the bomb. He leaned in close to the waitress. "Mercedes gave you the edited version. Your mother didn't take a payout to vanish. She ran for her life to protect something. Something the Villanueva dynasty would have destroyed without hesitation." "Protect what?" Tears welled up in the old chef's eyes as he prepared to shatter her world. "You, Isabel. She ran to keep you safe because you aren't just Esperanza Moreno's kid. You are Aurelio Villanueva's daughter, the blood heir to the very empire Mercedes has been gripping with an iron fist all these years." The room stopped spinning. Time froze. Isabel felt her legs turn to water. If Valentina and Andres hadn't grabbed her arms, she would have hit the floor hard. Andres stared at her, the color draining from his face, mirroring her shock. If the chef wasn't lying, the girl standing in front of him wasn't just staff fighting the boss, she was his sister. And every single thing they thought they understood about the Villanueva legacy was about to burn to the ground. The drive from the Golden Crown back to the tiny flat she shared with her mom felt like the longest trip of her life. Andres had insisted on driving, and honestly, she'd only said yes because her legs were still shaking too hard to carry her. Chef Maximo had slipped them his number before they left, promising to spill everything he knew once they were somewhere more private. But first, Isabel had to face her mother. She needed to hear it straight from her own lips. Was the bomb that just dropped actually real? Valentina had offers to ride along for moral support, but Isabel told her to stay back. This was something she had to face alone. Well, mostly alone. "I can wait on the curb if that makes it easier," Andres offered as he pulled up to the modest building where Isabel grew up. "No," Isabel said. "If what Chef Maximo said is true, this whole mess affects you just as much as me. You deserve to hear the full story." Andres nodded, his face mirroring the exact same confusion swirling in her own gut. Barely a few hours ago, he was the sole heir to a massive empire, the Golden Boy. Now, he was staring down the barrel of a reality where his sister had been waiting tables while he lived in the lap of luxury. They climbed the stairs in silence. The building was showing its age, peeling paint on the walls and flickering hallway lights that left a lot to the imagination. Isabel caught Andres scanning the decay without a word, likely tallying the differences between this place and the mansion he called home. "It's not much," Isabel murmured, suddenly painfully aware of the poverty clinging to the walls. "But it's our home. You don't have to—" "Stop," Andres cut in gently. "You don't justify a home by its square footage." They reached the apartment door. Isabel took a deep, steadying breath before sliding the key into the lock. She had no idea what she was about to find on the other side. She didn't know how her mother would react. She didn't even know if she was ready to hear truths that had been buried 6 feet deep her entire life. The door creaked open. The apartment was tiny, sure, but scrubbed within an inch of its life. Fresh flowers sat in a vase on the table, handmade curtains framed the windows, and family photos covered every available flat surface. It was a humble space, but you could feel the love in the room. Esperanza Moreno was perched on the sofa, a shawl draped over her shoulders and a teacup in her hands. When she saw Isabel walk in with a stranger, her eyes went wide. "Mija, what happened? Why are you home so early? And who is this?" But then her gaze locked onto Andres's face, and the teacup slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor into 1,000 shards. "It can't be," Esperanza whispered, bringing a trembling hand to her chest. "Aurelio?" "I'm not Aurelio, ma'am." Andres stepped forward into the light. "I'm his son, Andres Villanueva." Esperanza struggled to her feet, eyes welling with tears as she studied every inch of the young man's face. "You're the spitting image of him, exactly how he looked when we met. The same eyes, the same way you stand." "Mom," Isabel interrupted, her voice steel. "We need to talk." Esperanza finally tore her eyes away from Andres and looked at her daughter. In that instant, her expression shifted. It was like she'd been waiting for this moment her entire life, fearing it and craving it all at once. "You already know, don't you?" It wasn't a question. "I know enough. I know you worked for the Villanueva family. I know you had a thing with Don Aurelio, and I know what Chef Maximo told me tonight." Esperanza squeezed her eyes shut for a heartbeat. When she opened them, tears were streaming down her cheeks. "Maximo. After all these years, he still keeps the secrets." "Is it true, Mom?" Isabel stepped closer, taking her mother's hands in hers. "Is it true that Don Aurelio was my father?" The silence that followed felt like it stretched on for an eternity. Esperanza looked at her daughter with a cocktail of love, guilt, and something that looked suspiciously like relief. "Yes, mija, it's true. Aurelio Villanueva was the love of my life, and you are the living proof of that love." Isabel felt her knees buckle. Even though she suspected it, hearing the words actually leave her mother's lips was a completely different beast. It was real. It was final. It was the truth that shattered her identity forever. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Isabel's voice cracked. "My whole life I asked about my father, and you always said he was just some guy who walked out on us. Why did you lie to me?" "To protect you," Esperanza sobbed. "Everything I did to keep you safe." "Protect me from what?" Esperanza glanced at Andres, who was hovering by the door, clearly debating whether to bolt or stay. "Stay, son. You deserve to hear this just as much as my daughter. Please, sit. It's a long story, and I'm tired of carrying the weight of it alone." They squeezed onto the small sofa, Isabel sandwiched between her mother and Andres. Esperanza took a deep breath, steeling herself like she was about to lance a wound that had been festering for way too long. "I was barely 20 years old when I started working at the Villanueva estate. I was just a country girl with no education, no connections, nothing but 2 hands willing to work. They hired me as a maid and gave me all the grunt work no one else wanted, scrubbing floors, doing laundry, and cooking meals for the rest of the help." Her voice drifted off, lost in the past. "Aurelio wasn't like the other wealthy men I'd encountered. He didn't look right through me like I was furniture. He never treated me like I was beneath him. He actually used my name when he said hello. He asked how I was doing like he really cared. And you fell in love? Isabel asked softly. Not right away. I kept my guard up at first. I knew my place, a man from his world and a woman from mine. There was no future there. But Aurelio wouldn't give up. He'd go out of his way just to talk to me. He noticed I loved to read, so he brought me books. He made me laugh when everything else felt heavy. Esperanza smiled through her tears, caught in the memory of better days. One day, he found me crying in the kitchen. My mother was sick and I couldn't afford her medicine. Aurelio didn't say a word. He just took my hand and led me to the pharmacy. He paid for everything. When I asked how I could ever pay him back, he told me something I'll never forget. What did he say? Andres asked, his voice barely a whisper. He said, "You don't pay back love, Esperanza. You share it." That's when I knew I was a goner. I loved him more than anyone I'd ever known. And he loved you with everything he had. He told me every single day. We made plans, you know, crazy, impossible plans. He wanted to leave it all behind. Start fresh somewhere nobody knew us. Just Aurelio and Esperanza, no last names to keep us apart. So, what happened? Isabel needed to understand. If you loved each other that much, why did you end up apart? Esperanza's face went dark. Mercedes. The name dropped like a stone in a pond, sending ripples of tension through the small apartment. Mercedes Villanueva wasn't Aurelio's wife back then. She was the fiancé his family picked out, an arranged marriage between two powerful dynasties to merge their businesses and fortunes. Aurelio barely knew her, and he definitely didn't love her. But he married her, Andres said, his voice bitter. Not by choice. When Aurelio's family found out about us, the scandal was massive. His father threatened to cut him off, destroy his reputation, and ruin the life of anyone who dared to help him. And then they found out I was pregnant. Isabel felt her heart stop. Pregnant with me? Yes, my daughter. You were my greatest blessing. But in that moment, my biggest complication. What did they do? Isabel's voice trembled. Aurelio's family offered me money, a lot of money, to disappear, to keep my mouth shut, and to get rid of the baby. Horror washed over Isabel and Andres' faces. I refused, of course. Esperanza went on. I would never have done that. You were a part of Aurelio and me. You were love made into life. How could I destroy that? And Aurelio? What did he say? Aurelio wanted to fight. He wanted to stand up to his family, give it all up, and run away with me. But I couldn't let him. If he left everything for me, his family would have made our lives a living hell. They would have used every ounce of their power to crush us. And I didn't want the father of my child to end up resenting what he sacrificed for us. Tears were streaming down Esperanza's face now, uncontrollable. So I made a choice. The hardest choice of my life. I told Aurelio I didn't love him anymore. I told him I took his family's money. I told him I was leaving and never wanted to see him again. Mom! Isabel sobbed. I broke his heart to save him, to save you. Because if he knew the truth, he would have fought until he was destroyed, and his family would have come for us with everything they had. He never knew about me? Isabel asked, her voice cracking. My father never knew I existed? Esperanza shook her head. I told him I lost the pregnancy, that there was no baby, and he believed me. Because why would anyone lie about something like that? Andres spoke slowly, processing every word. My father lived his whole life believing the love of his life abandoned him and his baby died. Do you have any idea what that did to him? I know, Esperanza cried. I know because it did the same thing to me. Not a day goes by that I don't think of him. Not a single night where I don't dream of what could have been. Why didn't you tell him the truth later? Isabel asked. When things calmed down, when I got older, why didn't you look for him? Because Mercedes found me first. The silence that followed was absolute. A few years after you were born, Mercedes came to see me. I don't know how she tracked me down, but she did. She told me she knew about you. She knew Aurelio was your father. She warned me that if I ever tried to get close to him or claim anything for you, she'd destroy my life and hurt you. She threatened you? She showed me what she could do. She had photos of you, Isabel. Pictures of you playing in the park, coming out of school. She wanted me to know she could get to you whenever she wanted, that there was nowhere we could hide from her. A cold, hard rage settled deep in Isabel's chest. The whole time, Mercedes Villanueva knew. She knew there was a legitimate heir to the Villanueva empire out there. But instead of doing the right thing, she spent years making sure that heir rotted in poverty while she paraded around with a fortune she had no right to claim. There is something else, Esperanza said, her voice shaking. A secret I have kept buried for years, waiting for the right moment. What are you talking about, Mom? Esperanza struggled to her feet and shuffled into her bedroom. She came back a moment later clutching an old wooden box coated in dust and clearly hidden away for a lifetime. When I left the Villanueva estate, Aurelio managed to see me one last time. He gave me this, told me to keep it safe, said one day I would need it. She opened the lid. Inside lay yellowed papers, more photos, and something that made Andres' eyes go wide. A sealed envelope bearing the Villanueva family crest. I never opened it, Esperanza admitted. Aurelio begged me not to touch it unless it was absolutely necessary. I think that time is now. Isabel took the envelope, her hands trembling. It was addressed to her, though clearly written long before she took her first breath. The ink had faded, but the dedication was sharp. To my daughter. Open it, Andres said, his voice rough. We need to know. Isabel broke the seal and pulled out a handwritten letter. The script was elegant, precise, the hand of an educated man. She started to read aloud, and with every word, the world as they knew it began to shift. To my daughter, whose name I do not know, but whose existence I feel in my heart. If you are reading this, it means something has happened to me, and your mother has decided you deserve the truth. Know that I loved you from the second I knew you existed. They told me I lost you, but I never believed them. I cannot explain it, but my gut always told me you were alive. I know your mother lied to protect us all. And even though that lie broke me, I understand it. I forgive her. True love sometimes demands impossible sacrifices. Inside this box, you will find proof of who you are. A birth certificate I managed to secure in secret, photographs of your mother and me, and something else. Crucially, a copy of my original will, the one I wrote before my family forced me to change it. In it, I recognize you as my heir. I leave you half of everything I own. It is only fair. It is your birthright. You are my blood, even if the world refuses to see it. My family will try to burn these papers if they find them. That is why I entrusted them to your mother. Why I trusted her to guard your future. If you ever question who you are, remember this. You are my daughter. You are strong because you come from two people who loved each other against all odds. You deserve every good thing life has to give. I love you, even though we never met. Your father, Aurelio Villanueva. The silence that followed felt like a prayer. Isabel wept, clutching the letter to her chest. Esperanza was sobbing on the sofa, while Andres stared at the wall, processing the reality that his father knew. He had always suspected, and he had prepared for the day the truth would explode. There is a will. Andres finally found his voice. A legal will that names you as the heir. That means... Isabel couldn't finish the thought. It means my mother has been sitting on a fortune that legally belongs to you. It means everything we thought we knew about this family was a lie. And it means the story is far from over. Just then, Andres' phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know what you found. I know what you are planning. If you want to survive, know this. Mercedes has already hired Lorena Pacheco. The war has just begun. Andres showed the screen to the women. Who is Lorena Pacheco? Isabel asked. The most ruthless lawyer in the city, Andres replied, his face grim. And the fixer who has made my family's legal problems disappear for decades. Aurelio's letter was a bombshell, but Mercedes Villanueva was already prepping her counterstrike. The real battle was just warming up. The next few hours were the most intense of Isabel's life. No one slept. Esperanza brewed coffee while Isabel and Andres combed through every scrap of paper in the box, trying to piece together the puzzle Aurelio left behind. The will was real. It had notary seals, witness signatures, and a date proving it was drafted months before Aurelio married Mercedes. It was ironclad proof naming any biological child of Aurelio as the legitimate heir to half his fortune. Mother didn't have a clue about any of this, Andres muttered, his eyes glued to the documents. If she did, she would have burned the whole world down just to bury it. Aurelio knew how to cover his tracks, Esperanza called out from the kitchen. He told me he had a few loyal friends keeping the originals safe, people Mercedes would never look at twice. Who are they? Isabel pressed. He wouldn't say. Kept me in the dark for my own good. Said ignorance was my best armor. Andres' phone buzzed again. Another text from that blocked caller ID. Lorena Pacheco had a sit-down with a judge in the wee hours of the morning. They're drafting an injunction to lock down every single asset attached to the Villanueva name. Mercedes is making sure the well is dry before we get there. We've got until noon. Andres turned the screen so the women could see. Who's the leak? Isabel asked, and why are they on our side? No idea, but they're reading my mother's playbook in real time. We're wasting time. Isabel shot up from her chair. If she locks those accounts before we file the will, those papers are just expensive confetti. Wait, there might be someone. Esperanza's voice wavered as she spoke up. Someone who knew the man, not the tycoon. He might know where the masters are hidden. Who, Mom? Father Ignacio Valdez. He heard all of Aurelio's confessions. They grew up together on these streets. If Aurelio trusted a soul with his darkest secrets, it was that priest. St. Sebastian's Church sat anchored in the oldest, poorest district of the city. It was a humble pile of stone compared to the flashy cathedrals downtown, but it held a quiet, weary dignity. The three of them arrived just as the morning sun began to bleed through the stained glass windows. Early Mass had just wrapped up, and the handful of locals were shuffling out the heavy doors. Father Ignacio Valdez was ancient, with shock-white hair and hands that shook when he offered a blessing, but his eyes were sharp, missing nothing. The moment the priest spotted Esperanza walking through the nave, he froze. The silver chalice nearly slipped from his grip. "Father Ignacio?" Esperanza whispered, looking at him like he was an apparition. "It's been a lifetime." She walked slowly toward the altar. "I need you, Father. We all do." The priest glanced at Andres, then drifted to Isabel. When his gaze locked on the girl, his face completely transformed. A mix of shock and heartbreak washed over him. "You're the spitting image of him," he murmured, stepping closer to Isabel. "You have his eyes. That same fire he had before the world ground him down." Isabel hesitated. "You knew about me?" "I knew." He nodded solemnly. "Aurelio told me everything in this very room. Everyone else thought you were gone before you took your first breath, but he never gave up on you. He carried that hope to his grave." "My father died years ago," Andres cut in, his voice tight. "Doctors said his heart gave out." The priest stood there, silent as the stone walls. He glanced nervously at the heavy oak doors to ensure the church was empty. "You better come with me. There are truths I've been carrying for far too long." He led them down a dim side corridor into a cramped office, the walls lined with dusty theological texts and faded icons. He turned the key in the lock and sank behind a battered desk. "What I'm about to tell you, it's going to hurt. But before I speak, I need a vow from all of you. You use this for justice, not for vengeance." They nodded in unison. Aurelio's heart didn't just stop. The words hung heavy in the air. "What are you implying?" Andres leaned in, the color draining from his face. "I'm saying your father was poisoned. A slow, systematic drip over months, enough to weaken his heart until it finally quit." "That's impossible." Andres shook his head, desperate. "The doctors ran every test in the book. Doctors on your mother's payroll. Lab results filtered through your mother's lawyers. A funeral rushed by your mother. Do you see the picture now?" The silence was suffocating. Isabel felt the floor lurch beneath her. Esperanza buried her face in her hands, weeping without a sound, while Andres sat frozen, like a statue carved from grief. "How can you be sure?" Isabel finally managed to ask. "Because Aurelio knew. He came to me weeks before the end. He was fading fast, a shadow of himself. He suspected the poison, but he couldn't prove it. He gave me something for safekeeping. Said if anything happened, I had to make sure it got to the right person." Father Ignacio slid open a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, the wax seal still unbroken. "I never looked inside. Aurelio made me swear to give this to his true heir when the time was right. I think the clock just struck 12. Isabel's fingers shook as she reached for the packet. Stamped into the wax was the unmistakable Villanueva crest, the exact same symbol she'd seen tucked away among her mother's things. "Go on," Esperanza murmured, her voice barely audible. "Your father meant for this to find you." Isabel cracked the wax seal. Papers slid out. Bank certificates, property deeds, heavy legal stock. Then she froze, her heart hammered against her ribs. Nestled among the papers was a small digital voice recorder. "What's all this?" she asked. Father Ignacio's expression was grim. "Evidence. Aurelio managed to capture a conversation just weeks before he passed. It changes everything." Andres reached out, turning the small gadget over in his hands. "There's a port right here on the desk," he said, spotting the connection. "Play it," Isabel insisted. "We deserve the truth." Static filled the air, followed by a voice, frail, raspy, yet impossible to mistake. Aurelio Villanueva spoke, his voice echoing slightly. "Mercedes, don't think I don't know. You're poisoning me." Mercedes answered, her tone chillingly calm. "You're delusional, Aurelio. Your mind is failing you." "My mind has never been sharper. I know you've been messing with my dosage. Rivas confirmed it before you got rid of him." "Rivas was a fool," she scoffed. He was an honest man. That's exactly why you destroyed him." Silence stretched, and when Mercedes spoke again, the mask was gone. "Suppose I am. What are you going to do about it? Go to the police? With what proof? I own the best legal teams in the city. Half the judiciary eats out of the palm of my hand. I have the testament, the real one, the one I drafted before our wedding that acknowledges my daughter." Mercedes let out a cruel, high-pitched laugh. "Your brat is dead. Esperanza miscarried decades ago. You're lying, and you know it. You knew she survived, and you kept her from me. So what if I did? That girl is trash, the spawn of a housekeeper, a nobody. She is a Villanueva. By right, she inherits half of this estate. That piece of paper will never leave this house. Once you're gone, and it won't be long now, darling, I'll burn every last copy myself. You won't get them all. I've made arrangements." "Arrangements? Please. What, did you give it to that lush of a priest? Hiding scraps where you think I won't look? You'll never find it all. One day, the truth will surface. And when it does, Mercedes, your entire empire of lies comes down. Is that a threat?" "No, it's a promise." The audio cut out. A heavy, suffocating silence filled Father Ignacio's office. Esperanza wept silently, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. Isabel felt a volatile mix of grief and fury, but Andres looked utterly broken. "My mother," he whispered, staring at the floor. "She murdered him. She knew everything, and she killed him for it." Isabel reached for him. "Andres." He pulled away. "Don't. I need a minute." He turned his back to them, facing the window, his shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. "There is more," Father Ignacio said gently. "Your father didn't just leave a recording, he left a weapon." Isabel shuffled through the stack until she found a document that looked different from the financial records. It was a formal filing, dated only a few days before Aurelio's death. "It's a criminal complaint," Isabel read aloud, "addressed to the State Attorney General. Charges of attempted murder, fraud, and conspiracy to conceal lawful heirs." "He never made it to the courthouse," the priest explained. "Time ran out on him, but the affidavit stands. Between these papers and that tape, we have enough to trigger a full investigation. Then we move," Isabel said. She stood tall, steeling herself. "We have to hit her before she locks down the accounts or burns more evidence." "How?" Esperanza asked, voice trembling. "We're nobodies. We don't have money or connections." "Actually, you have something better." The voice came from the doorway. They spun around to find Chef Maximo Ibarra standing there, accompanied by a stranger. Next to the chef stood a sharp-dressed woman in her 40s, clutching a leather briefcase like a shield. She looked ready for war. "Allow me to introduce Dr. Carmen Arriaga," Maximo announced, "Special Prosecutor for Anti-Corruption. She's been building a file on Mercedes Villanueva for 3 years. The woman strode into the room. "Apologies for barging in. My associate here brought me up to speed on the events of last night. I've spent years trying to nail that woman. She destroys careers and lives without blinking. I knew she was dirty, but I could never get anything to stick. Until now." Isabel held up the digital recorder. For the first time, the prosecutor grinned. "With what I have, and what you just found, we can bury her, but we have to strike fast. My contacts on the street tell me Lorena Pacheco is already racing to the courthouse to lock down those assets. She's filing for the freeze orders right now. What's the move?" Andres stood by the window, his voice sounding like gravel but commanding enough to fill the room. "I need everyone. All of you. With me. We're taking this straight to a federal magistrate before Mercedes can call in favors with the state judges. It's time to open a formal murder inquiry." Isabel's gaze drifted from her mother to Andres, finally settling on Father Ignacio. "My father died fighting for what was right," she stated. "I'm going to finish what he started." Esperanza squeezed her daughter's hand. "Let's go, mija, together, the way it was meant to be." They walked out of the sanctuary into the unknown, hearts buoyed by hope, completely unaware of the shadow watching them from a sedan parked across the street. Lorena Pacheco pressed the phone tight against her ear. "Mrs. Villanueva, we have a situation, a serious one." The priest took them in, and Prosecutor Arriaga just joined the fold. The silence on the other end was heavier than any scream could ever be. When Mercedes finally spoke, the temperature dropped. "Execute Plan B. It is time those people learned the cost of defying me." The war was on, and losing was not in Mercedes Villanueva's vocabulary. The ride to the federal courthouse was thick with tension. Carmen Arriaga drove with white-knuckled focus, knowing the clock was ticking, while she broke down the legal nightmare they were facing. Mercedes has spent decades spinning a web of protection, she said, eyes glued to the asphalt. State judges, city council members, police chiefs, they're all either in her pocket or terrified of her. That's why we have to go federal. Her reach doesn't extend that high. Isabel piped up from the back where she was wedged in tight. How do you know all this? She looked between her mother and Andres. 3 years ago, Mercedes crushed a family that dared to sue her for fraud. The father was framed and thrown in prison on trumped-up charges. The mother lost custody, and the kids were scattered into the foster system across different cities. That's pure evil, Esperanza whispered. That was my family, Carmen replied, her voice cracking. My brother, his wife, my nephews. She ruined them because my brother found dirt in one of her ledgers. I've spent every single day since then building a case to take her down. A heavy silence filled the car. Isabel suddenly realized this wasn't just professional duty for the prosecutor. It wasn't just about the law, it was a vendetta. Andres spoke up next. And Chef Maximo? How does he fit into the puzzle? Maximo turned from the passenger seat to face them. I served the Villanueva family for 15 years. I saw things that kept me up at night, but I was terrified to speak up, terrified of what she'd do to me, to my own kin. What changed? I met Arriaga 2 years back. She offered me a shield in exchange for the truth. I've been her eyes and ears inside the house ever since, just waiting for the right moment to strike. You're the one who sent those anonymous tips to Andres? Isabel realized aloud. I have friends still working inside the mansion. Staff members who are sick of living in fear. When I heard about the incident at the restaurant last night, I knew time was up. The federal courthouse loomed ahead, an imposing structure of white pillars meant to symbolize blind justice. Carmen killed the engine, and they scrambled out of the vehicle. Judge Sebastian Montero is a straight shooter, Carmen explained as they marched toward the entrance. Incorruptible. Mercedes has tried to buy him off for years and failed every time. That's why we need him specifically. They cleared the steps and breezed through security. Isabel's heart pounded against her ribs as they hurried down the marble corridors toward chambers. But when they reached the office door, they found their path blocked. Lorena Pacheco stood guard, clutching a manila envelope. She wore a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Prosecutor Arriaga, what a delightful surprise. Her voice dripped with fake warmth, and with such a colorful entourage. Pacheco, Carmen shot back, icy and sharp. You have no jurisdiction in a federal building. I don't need jurisdiction to act as a courier. Judge Montero has just been served with a temporary injunction against any filings related to the Villanueva estate. That's impossible. Only a higher court could override. The Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court, Lorena interrupted, her grin widening. He's an old family friend. He signed the order exactly 1 hour ago. The color drained from Carmen's face. This is obstruction of justice. It's a legal procedure, darling. Maybe you should have paid more attention in law school. Isabel felt a hot ball of rage expanding in her chest. They had come this far, risked everything, only to be walled off by dirty money and rigged technicalities. You can't keep a lid on this forever, she said, stepping into Lorena's personal space. We have the receipts. A recording. Mercedes, on tape, admitting she poisoned my father. For a split second, Lorena's polished smile cracked. It was barely a flicker, but Isabel caught it. A recording, Lorena mused. How terribly convenient. I assume you obtained this through perfectly legal channels admissible in court? Handed over by a priest, Isabel countered, straight from Aurelio Villanueva himself. Andres stepped forward. And I can verify what's on it. Ah, Lorena sighed. The prodigal son, stabbing his own mother in the back. She tutted, feigning sympathy. Mercedes is going to be heartbroken, after everything she sacrificed for your sake. Sacrificed? Andres let out a dry, bitter laugh. The only things my mother ever sacrificed were the people standing between her and more power. So dramatic, Lorena drawled, but I'm afraid your little soap opera will have to be put on hold. This restraining order holds for 72 hours. More than enough time for our legal team to dismantle these absurd allegations. 72 hours? Carmen frowned, her legal instincts flaring. That is highly irregular for a temporary injunction. The presiding judge felt the unique circumstances warranted it. It didn't sit right. Isabel felt a knot in her stomach. Lorena was too poised, too calm for someone who was supposedly just stalling for time. What are you two actually planning? She asked point blank. Lorena gave her a look that bordered on respect. Sharp, she admitted. Your father was the same way. A pity it didn't do him much good in the end. Keep his name out of your mouth. Or what? You'll threaten me? Attack me right here in front of the security cameras and witnesses? Lorena smirked. Please, go ahead. It would make our lives so much easier. Carmen gripped Isabel's shoulder, holding her back. Don't take the bait, Isabel. That is exactly what she wants. Lorena checked her watch with an exaggerated sigh. I'd love to stay and chat, but I'm on a tight schedule. Documents to shred, witnesses to strong-arm. You know, the usual grind. You just confessed to obstruction of justice, Carmen snapped. It was sarcasm, counselor, Lorena shot back. You really should learn to spot the difference. With one final venomous smile, Lorena Pacheco turned and strutted down the hall, her heels clicking against the marble like gunfire. This feels wrong, Maximo said, breaking his silence. Mercedes never plays pure defense. If she asked for 72 hours, it's because she needs exactly that much time for something specific. For what? Esperanza asked, her voice trembling. I don't know, Maximo replied grimly, but we have to figure it out before the clock runs out. The group retreated to a small cafe near the courthouse, trying to clear their heads and strategize their next move. Prosecutor Arriaga had been working the phones, looking for a loophole, but every door was being slammed in her face. There is something I haven't told you, Esperanza said suddenly, cutting through the tense silence. Something I probably should have mentioned earlier. The whole table turned to look at her. When Mercedes came to threaten me all those years ago, she didn't just bring photos of Isabel. She brought a document she forced me to sign. What kind of document? Isabel asked. A non-disclosure agreement. It forbade me from speaking about my relationship with Aurelio, about your existence or anything related to the Villanueva family. In exchange, she promised not to hurt you. You signed it? I was terrified, mihija. You were just a child. Mercedes showed me what she was capable of, the lives she had ruined. I signed it to keep you safe. Carmen leaned across the table, a new spark in her eyes. Do you still have that document? Yes, I kept it with the other things in the box. Esperanza, Carmen breathed. That could change everything. If Mercedes forced you to sign under duress, the agreement is void. More importantly, it proves she knew about Isabel and actively worked to bury the truth. It is concrete evidence of a conspiracy, but it is sitting in my apartment. Esperanza's face paled. If Mercedes knows what we have, she might send someone to find it. Or worse. Andres finished the thought. We have to go, now. Isabel stood up. Wait. Maximo held up a hand. If Mercedes has eyes on the place, walking through the front door is exactly what she wants us to do. So, what do you suggest? I have an idea, he said, but you are going to have to trust me. Maximo's plan was risky but brilliant. Instead of storming Esperanza's apartment together, they would split into two teams. Carmen and Andres would approach the main entrance, acting as decoys to draw attention. Meanwhile, Isabel, Esperanza, and Maximo would slip in through the service entrance, a route Maximo knew from his years working in the neighborhood. How do you know so much about my mother's building? Isabel asked as they hurried down a back alley. Before I worked at the Golden Crown, I worked a lot of odd jobs in this area. I know every alley, every doorway, every escape route. Why does this feel like we are in a spy movie? Because in a way, we are. Mercedes Villanueva built her empire like it was an intelligence operation. Surveillance, informants, countermeasures, the works. To beat her, you have to get inside her head. They reached the service entrance. Maximo fished a set of keys from his pocket. Esperanza stared at him. Where did you even get those? Buddy of mine in maintenance told him it was life or death. And he just bought that? I told him the truth, that Aurelio Villanueva's daughter needed help taking back what was hers. Turns out Aurelio bailed his family out years ago when everyone else turned their backs. He handed them over without a second thought. They took the service stairs to dodge the cameras in the elevator. Reaching Esperanza's floor, Maximo carefully peeked around the doorframe. We've got company, he whispered. 2 guys, definitely not neighbors. How do we get past them? We don't, but maybe we don't have to. Maximo pulled out his phone and thumbed a quick text. A moment later, one of the goons' phones buzzed. He answered, muttered something, and they both marched toward the elevators. What did you just do? Isabel asked, eyes wide. Spoofed a number, sent a fake order. They think Carmen and Andres just breached the front lobby and need backup. That's brilliant. No, that's survival. You pick up a few things working in Mercedes' orbit. They slipped quickly into the apartment. Esperanza made a beeline for her bedroom, hunting for the document box. Found it. She returned holding a yellowed envelope. The non-disclosure agreement. Isabel took it, scanning the papers. It matched her mother's description perfectly, but there was something else, a detail Esperanza had either missed or forgotten. "Mom, look at this. There's another sheet stuck to the back." With gentle fingers, Isabel peeled apart the pages that time had fused together. The page underneath was something else entirely. Not legal jargon, but a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, Aurelio's elegant script. "Esperanza, my love, if you are reading this, Mercedes forced your hand just as I feared. But you need to know, that paper is worthless. I know, because I made sure of it. The notary was a plant, an actor I hired to fool Mercedes. No official witness meant the contract was void from the start. I hid this note here, knowing Mercedes would never look twice. But you would. Use this when the time is right. Break the cage she built around you. I love you. Always have. And when our daughter learns the truth, I hope she understands that every choice I made was to keep you both safe. Yours forever, Aurelio." Esperanza was sobbing by the time Isabel finished reading. Even Maximo looked misty-eyed. "He didn't miss a thing," Isabel whispered, awestruck. "He's still looking out for us even now. He was one of a kind." Maximo nodded. Mercedes never deserved him. Maximo's phone buzzed. He frowned. "Trouble. The goons are back. Carmen and Andres are pinned down in the lobby. We need to move. Now." He pocketed his phone. "Take the fire escape. I'll draw their fire." "You can't fight them alone," Isabel argued. "I'm not fighting anyone, just giving them a new rabbit to chase." Before they could object, Maximo strode out of the apartment, heading straight for the thugs coming down the hall. "Hey," he shouted. "You two looking for the Villanueva heiress?" Just saw her bolt out of the main entrance, jumped in a cab. The men hesitated, eyeing him suspiciously, but his panic sold it. They turned and sprinted for the main stairs. Isabel and Esperanza scrambled down the fire escape. They hit the street and found Carmen and Andres idling in the car nearby. "Did you get it?" Carmen asked. Isabel held the papers up. "We got it. And then some. This changes everything." As they peeled away, nobody spotted the motorcycle tailing them from a safe distance. Back at the Villanueva estate, Mercedes took a call that finally brought a smile to her face. "You have a visual? Excellent. Don't lose them. Get everything ready for tonight. It is time my dear son and his little sister learned a lesson they won't forget." She hung up, gazing out over the city she had ruled for decades. The hunt was on. Carmen's car wove through the city traffic as the sun began to dip. Nearly 24 hours had passed since Isabel dropped that photo in the restaurant, and her entire reality had shifted since then. "We've got a tail," Maximo said from the back, eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "Motorcycle. Been on us since we left the apartment." Carmen nodded, her face unreadable. "I know they're tailing us. Let 'em watch. I actually want the matriarch to see exactly where we're headed." "And where is that?" Isabel pressed. "Somewhere her money doesn't buy influence. My turf, the Federal Prosecutor's Bureau. Once we cross that threshold, Mercedes Villanueva is just another citizen. She can't touch us." Isabel's pocket buzzed. A text from Valentina lit up the screen. "Girl, where you at? Ramiro just shut the whole diner down. Said the orders came straight from the Queen Bee herself. We're all locked out indefinitely. I'm freaking out here. Call me." Guilt hit Isabel like a physical blow. With her world collapsing, she'd completely ghosted the one person who always had her back. Her thumbs flew across the screen. "I'm safe. It's a novel. I'll spill everything later. Stay safe, and stay far away from anyone with the last name Villanueva." She killed the screen and turned her attention to her mother. Esperanza looked like a ghost. Her breath was coming in shallow, ragged gasps. The day's drama was demanding a price her frail body couldn't afford to pay. "Ma, you holding up?" "Just a bit worn out, sweetie." She forced a smile, but the tremor in her hands gave it away. "Don't you waste a second worrying about me. You belong in bed, not chasing bad guys across the metro. And miss seeing your father finally get what he's owed? Not a chance. I've been waiting for this day since before you were born." Andres, who had been brooding in the corner for the last few miles, finally broke his silence. "The math doesn't add up. My mother is a shark, but she's not an idiot. She knows we're holding the smoking gun. She knows Carmen is involved. So why did she just let us walk out the door? Why no security team at the apartment?" "Because she doesn't need physical force. The prosecutor's voice was grim. Mercedes Villanueva thinks thugs are beneath her. She prefers to dismantle people piece by piece. What are you saying? I'm saying that while we were playing detective, she was probably rearranging the board. Her plan B isn't a hitman. It's something far more permanent. They pulled up to the federal building just as the last light drained from the sky. The structure was a monolith of concrete and bulletproof glass built to shrug off everything from car bombs to political riots. Carmen flashed her badge, steering them through a gauntlet of metal detectors until they reached her office on the 5th floor. "Sanctuary," she said, bolting the door. "I've got agents down the hall who can watch our backs. Even Mercedes isn't crazy enough to siege a federal outpost." "Okay, we're safe. Now what?" Isabel asked. "We have the evidence, but that restraining order she slapped on you is still active." "There's a loophole." Carmen settled into her leather chair. "If we prove the order was bought and paid for, I can get a federal judge to toss it out before lunch. And I think I've got the ammunition right here." She flipped open a thick dossier resting on her blotter. "For 3 years, I've been building a timeline. Every handshake, every bribe, every threat, every single life she stepped on. The only piece missing was a live witness, someone brave enough to connect the dots on the record. My brother," Carmen's voice cracked, losing its professional edge. "He was supposed to be that witness. But after Mercedes finished with him, there wasn't much left. She took his family, his career, his freedom. She even took his fight. Where is he now?" Esperanza's voice was gentle. "Psychiatric ward, a facility on the edge of town. He hasn't spoken a word in 6 months. Doctors call it catastrophic psychological trauma." The silence in the room grew heavy. Suddenly, it clicked for Isabel. Carmen's crusade wasn't about the law, it was a blood feud. "But I have you 3 now." Carmen straightened her jacket, locking away the emotion. "Esperanza, we need you on record about the intimidation. Andres, you're the insider. You can validate the family dynamics. And Isabel, your DNA is the proof of the fraud. That, plus Aurelio's tape, together you finish what my brother started. You bring the whole Villanueva kingdom crashing down." The shrill ring of the landline cut the air. Carmen snatched it up, but her face drained of color almost instantly. The mask of confidence shattered into pure horror. "What? When did that drop?" "No, that's impossible." She slammed the receiver down, her hands shaking violently. "What is it?" Andres stepped forward. "Your mother," Carmen whispered. She just pulled the trigger on Plan B. She grabbed a remote and flicked on the wall-mounted monitor. The evening news filled the screen, broadcasting live with a breaking news banner flashing red. The anchor's voice was crisp. "We are receiving reports that prominent philanthropist Andres Villanueva has been formally indicted on charges of massive corporate fraud and money laundering. Sources allege the Villanueva heir siphoned millions from charity funds into private offshore accounts." Andres staggered back, looking like he'd been punched in the gut. "That's insanity. I haven't touched a dime, not 1 single cent." The reporter continued. "The charges were filed personally by Board President Mercedes Villanueva de Montenegro. She released a statement expressing heartbreak and profound disappointment at her son's betrayal." The screen cut away to a live feed of a press podium. Mercedes stood before a wall of recording devices, draped in black like a grieving saint, a single, rehearsed tear tracing a path down her cheek. "This breaks my heart more than anything," she declared. "To learn that the heir my late husband cherished has been siphoning funds from our legacy for years. Yet the law applies to everyone. We cannot hide the truth, even when the thief shares our last name." "She's spinning lies," Andres muttered under his breath. "She locked me out of the accounts herself. I never signed a single check, it was all her." The news anchor didn't stop there. "Police sources state a warrant is out for Isabel Montenegro, a server at the Golden Crown, on charges of conspiracy and blackmail against the Villanueva estate." Isabel felt the room tilt violently. The floor seemed to dissolve beneath her boots. "The filing alleges Montenegro forged birth records claiming descent from the late Aurelio Villanueva, a complex fraud meant to hijack the family fortune." Esperanza gasped, clutching her chest as the color drained from her face in an instant. "Mom!" Isabel rushed to catch her. "Air! I can't get air!" Esperanza wheezed, fingers digging into her blouse. "Someone call an ambulance!" Isabel screamed. Carmen was already on the line with dispatch while Maximo eased the older woman onto the sofa. She was shaking hard, her lips turning a terrifying shade of blue. "Stay with me, Mama," Isabel sobbed, squeezing her hand tight. "Don't you dare leave me now." "Not after we survived this much, mija," Esperanza whispered, barely audible. "Listen to me. Don't let your father win. He knew your worth. So do I. Shh, don't talk, Mom. Save your strength. Help is almost here. Swear it. Swear you'll keep fighting. I promise, Mom. I swear. The EMTs burst in minutes later. As the medics worked to stabilize Esperanza and load her onto the gurney, Isabel refused to let go. I'm riding with her, she told Carmen. Step outside this building and you're in handcuffs. The warrant is live. I don't care, that's my mother. Isabel, stop. Carmen grabbed her shoulders firmly. If they book you, Mercedes wins. Your mother spent her whole life shielding you from them. Are you going to throw that sacrifice away? Tears streamed down Isabel's face as she watched the stretcher disappear. I'll go. Maximo stepped forward. I'll watch over her like she's my own blood. You have my word. Why? Isabel asked, voice breaking. Why put yourself on the line for us? Maximo's eyes held the weight of old regrets. Because years ago, when the Villanuevas threw your mother out on the street, I stood by and did nothing. I was young, terrified, and silent. That cowardice has haunted me every day since. This is my chance to balance the scales. Before she could argue, he turned and followed the medics to the elevator. The quiet that settled over the office was crushing. Andres collapsed into a chair, head in his hands, while Isabel stood by the glass, watching the city blur through her tears. My mother knew this was coming, Andres finally said. That's why she demanded the 72-hour window. She needed a head start to plant the evidence and prep her strike. How could she do this? Isabel whispered. You're her son. I was never a son. I was an asset, just another pawn on her board. The moment I tried to think for myself, she decided to wipe me off the map. Carmen was scrolling through her phone, brow furrowed. Something here doesn't add up. The charges against Andres cite wire transfers to offshore accounts, but faking that requires deep access to the bank's back-end servers. Mother owns half the city, Andres replied bitterly. She has people for that. No, this is different. We're talking about altering federal databases. That takes military-grade tech and a specialist. Carmen's phone buzzed again. This time her confusion shifted to shock. Are you absolutely positive? 100%. A pause. Stay put. I'm coming down. She hung up, eyes wide as she looked at the pair. That was my paralegal. A courier just dropped an unmarked package at the DA's front desk. It contains files that, according to the note, prove the entire case against you two is a setup. And there's a bonus. What is it? Surveillance footage. It catches Lorena Pacheco meeting a black hat hacker exactly 3 days ago, right when the fake fraud trails started appearing. Who sent it? Isabel asked. The note just says it's from someone else Mercedes ruined, someone who finally found the guts to hit back. Carmen bolted for the lobby. Isabel and Andres locked eyes, a flicker of hope finally cutting through the gloom. You think they're baiting us? Andres asked, voice low. I can't be sure, but if this is legitimate, if it's genuine, then my mother finally slipped up. One wrong move that could strip her of everything. Isabel's screen lit up. Maximo. He was calling from the clinic. She's stable, he said, the tension clearly gone from his tone. Doctors are calling it a severe arrhythmia spike. Stress-induced, obviously, but they managed to bring her heart rate down. She's awake and asking for you. Thank God. Isabel choked back a sob. Put her on, please. Just for a second. She's weak. The line rustled, then a voice came through, frail but unmistakably hers. My baby girl, I'm still here. Mom, talk to me. How are you? Old? Exhausted? Esperanza let out a soft chuckle that dissolved into a cough. But don't worry, I'm not checking out yet. Not until I watch that woman pay for every scrap of misery she caused us. Mom, stop. Forget about her right now. Just focus on getting better. Isabel, listen to me. There is a truth I've kept buried. Something about your father that changes the whole game. About Aurelio? What is it? Father Ignacio wasn't the only one holding his secrets. There was someone else. Someone closer to the family than Mercedes ever imagined. Who, Mom? His own blood. His sister. Aurelio had a younger sister. Mercedes despised her, of course, kicked her out of the dynasty years ago, stripped her of every penny. But before he passed, Aurelio smuggled copies of everything to her. Everything, Isabel, including the original birth certificate he signed in secret the day you were born. He signed it? Legally? Yes, sweetheart. He found a way to acknowledge you right under Mercedes's nose. You are a true Villanueva by law. You always were. The room seemed to tilt beneath Isabel's feet. If Esperanza wasn't delirious, this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was irrefutable proof of identity, hard evidence. What's her name, my aunt? Catalina Villanueva. She's been living in exile ever since Mercedes banished her. But if anyone holds the silver bullet to take that witch down, it's Catalina. The office door slammed open. Carmen marched in, clutching a manila envelope, her face a mask of frantic victory. The footage is authentic. We caught Lorena Pacheco on tape plotting to plant fake evidence. It's enough to torch every accusation they threw at you and launch a criminal probe against her instead. There's something bigger, Isabel cut in, speaking fast. My father had a sister, Catalina Villanueva. She holds the duplicate archives, even a birth certificate with my father's signature. Carmen stared, eyes widening in shock. A sister? That's not in any public record. Because Mercedes scrubbed her from the family tree. But she's real, and she's the key to ending this war. We need to track her down. Carmen was already typing furiously. If we can ping her location before Mercedes realizes we're onto her. Mercedes already knows. A new voice sliced through the tension. Every head whipped toward the entrance. Standing in the doorway, framed by a travel coat and gripping a small suitcase, stood a woman in her 60s. She bore Aurelio's sharp aristocratic features, the same eyes that stared back at Isabel every morning in the mirror. I am Catalina Villanueva, the woman announced, her gaze locked on Isabel, and I have been waiting 20 years for this moment. She approached Isabel with slow, deliberate steps, tears welling up. You look exactly like him. My brother, the finest man I ever knew. You're my aunt. I'm more than that, my dear. Catalina pulled a thick packet from her purse. I'm the one who's going to help you bury the woman who murdered your father. And I brought the shovel. As Catalina unsealed the envelope and fanned the papers across Carmen's desk, Isabel felt the shift. The final siege had begun, and this time Mercedes Villanueva had nowhere left to run. The files that Catalina Villanueva spread over the desk told a story that had been suffocated in silence for decades. Notarized deeds, photographs, bank ledgers, and right in the center, a birth certificate bearing 2 signatures. Esperanza Moreno as mother and Aurelio Villanueva as father. My brother reached out to me weeks before the end. Catalina explained, voice trembling. He knew Mercedes was poisoning him. He knew his clock was running out. He sent me this archive with one command. Wait until his daughter was strong enough to fight back. But how did you know now was the time? Isabel asked. And who called me last night? Someone claimed Isabel Montenegro had finally found herself and needed reinforcements. Who made the call? Catalina smiled through her tears. A voice I'd know anywhere. Maximo Ibarra, the man who was a brother to Aurelio in everything but blood. The very same man standing guard over your mother at the hospital right now. Isabel felt her chest tighten with emotion. Maximo wasn't just a leak. He was the silent sentinel of a master plan Aurelio had engineered from his deathbed. Is that it? Catalina reached into her bag and produced one final sealed envelope. This is the real will. Aurelio wrote it 3 days before he died, back when he realized he wasn't making it out of that house alive. He filed it at a foreign consulate, completely outside Mercedes' jurisdiction. Carmen took the file, scanning the pages in silence. Her eyes widened with every paragraph. This destroys her. What does it say? Andre asked, his voice trembling. It says Aurelio knew exactly what was happening. He knew Mercedes was poisoning him. It explicitly disinherits her for treason and attempted murder. The entire Villanueva estate is to be split 50-50 between his only 2 legitimate children. 2 children? Isabel furrowed her brow. You and Andres? Carmen said, locking eyes with her. Aurelio never stopped loving his son. He just wanted to shield him from that woman. This document lists Andres as a victim of Mercedes, just like you. Andres collapsed into the nearest chair, tears streaming down his face without restraint. My father, after everything my mother put him through, he still thought of me. And he always thought of you. Catalina stepped toward her nephew, placing a hand on his shoulder. He talked about you constantly. He was so proud of the man you were becoming. He hated watching Mercedes pull your strings, but he knew you'd eventually find the guts to cut them. I did, Andres whispered. Took me long enough, but I did it. You arrived exactly when you needed to, Isabel said, gripping her brother's hand. We arrived together. The night that followed was a blur of legal warfare. Carmen worked through the darkness, coordinating with federal judges and securing warrants, making sure every piece of evidence was bulletproof. By the time the sun started to crest over the skyline, the trap was sprung. The arrest of Mercedes Villanueva broke across every major news network in real time. The woman who had held the city in a grip of terror for decades was dragged from her mansion in handcuffs, screaming threats that fell on deaf ears. Lorena Pacheco was picked up minutes later, with the footage of her scheming playing on loop across national television, undeniable proof of her guilt. The judge who signed the restraining order resigned before he could be impeached, his career incinerated by his own corruption. Meanwhile, in a quiet hospital room, Isabel held her mother's hand as the TV screen showed the collapse of Mercedes' house of cards. "We did it, Mom," Isabel wept softly. "Dad was right. The truth always finds a way out." Esperanza offered a weak smile, a faint flush returning to her pale skin. "Your father would be so proud of you." "I am so proud of you." The door swung open, and Andres walked in carrying a massive bouquet, with Catalina and Maximo right behind him. Trailing them with a grin stretching ear to ear was Valentina. "Girl!" she shouted, rushing to tackle Isabel in a hug. "I saw it all on the news. I can't believe it. Why didn't you call me? It all happened so fast." Isabel laughed through her tears. "You're here now. That's what counts. You're crazy if you think I'd miss this. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't turn into a stuck-up heiress." Laughter filled the small room, a sound that felt impossible just hours ago. Catalina moved to Esperanza's bedside. "You must be the woman my brother loved his entire life," she said gently. "Now I see why. You have the bravest heart I've ever encountered." "I just did what any mother would do," Esperanza replied. "I protected my daughter." "You did more than that. You gave Isabel the strength to become who she is. That is a legacy no amount of money can buy." The following weeks brought changes Isabel never could have predicted. Aurelio's will was validated, and both she and Andres were officially recognized as the lawful heirs to the Villanueva fortune. Yet, their first joint decision wasn't about luxury or assets, it was about justice. They used a chunk of the inheritance to launch a foundation in Aurelio's name, dedicated to legal aid for victims of corporate abuse. Carmen's family, including her recovering brother, were the very first beneficiaries. Esperanza received the absolute best medical care money could buy. Doctors warned the recovery would be a marathon, not a sprint, but for the first time in years, she had a real future to look forward to. Maximo was named director of the Golden Crown restaurant, which Isabel and Andres kept running as a tribute to where their journey began. Valentina was promoted to general manager, finally calling the shots like she always deserved. As for Ramiro Fuentes, the manager who had silently enabled so much humiliation, he was let go. Not with cruelty, but with a firm reminder that looking the other way carries a heavy price. 1 month after the fall of Mercedes, Isabel stood alone in the cemetery where Aurelio Villanueva was buried. Andres walked in step with her, both of them clutching bouquets. They knelt in the grass, the cemetery's heavy silence broken only by the chirping of birds overhead. "Hey, Dad," Isabel whispered. "I know we never actually got to meet face to face. I know life cheated us out of that chance, but I need you to know. I felt you right there with me through every second of this fight. Your love was like a shield, even from the other side." Andres reached out, gripping his sister's hand tight. "I'm sorry, Dad. For all those years I was blind to the truth, for letting fear call the shots. But I swear to you, from today on, I'm living the way you would have wanted, with honesty, with guts, and with heart." A gentle breeze swept around them, feeling almost like Aurelio's answer from wherever he was now. Isabel shut her eyes, and for a split second she could have sworn her father was right there. It wasn't like some ghost story, just a deep, unfamiliar warmth spreading through her chest. When she opened her eyes, her mother was making her way toward them, leaning heavily on Catalina's arm. Esperanza was still frail, but she wouldn't take no for an answer. She came to a halt in front of Aurelio's marker, tears streaming down her face unchecked. "I kept my word, my love," she murmured. "I kept her safe, and look at her now. She's everything we ever dreamed she'd be." Isabel pulled her mother into an embrace as Andres and Catalina stepped in close to join them. 4 souls torn apart by tragedy, finally stitched back together by a love that had outlasted it all. Later that evening, gathered around the dinner table in the cramped apartment where Isabel grew up, Esperanza raised her glass. Her hand trembled, but her grip was steady. "To Aurelio," she said, "to the man who loved us enough to plant seeds that would only blossom decades after he was gone." "To Dad," Isabel and Andres echoed in unison. "And to us," Catalina added softly, "to the family that finally found its way back home. Outside, the stars looked down on a city that had watched an empire of lies crumble to dust, while something new rose in its place. Something built on the only foundation that actually lasts: love. Ah,